Hello and welcome again to Where the Road Rises. With me, your host, Eileen Curlin Walsh. The recent wild popularity of Marie Kondo's book and Netflix show, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, prompted me to invite back our very own organizing and professional organizing guru, M. Colleen Klimczak, just to see what all the fuss is about. Colleen is a professional organizer, certified. She is a member of NAPO, which is the National Association of Professional Organizers. And she is the owner of Peace of Mind Professional Organizing, LLC, right here in her own backyard. Since '03, Colleen has been helping us get a handle on our space, our stuff, our paper, and our time, so we can regain peace of mind in our personal and professional lives. In addition to that hands-on guidance in our homes, in our offices, she's not afraid to go in her basement or the attic. Colleen is an adjunct professor here at Moraine Valley Community College and a member of the Chicagoland Speakers Network. She presents at conferences to organizations large and small, local and national, to professionals and lay people on the power of organizing. And we are just delighted she will join us and share her wisdom with us today. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Yes, thanks for coming back to the show. It's been about 3 years now, so we want to refresh and just remind our viewers, Colleen, a little about you, your background, personal and professional, and how you came to this world of organization.
Thank you for the chance. So I've been an organizer. It'll be 16 years in June. I came at it from the direction of a business background, minor in psychology, and I find that I use all of those skills that brought me to this point every day. I also didn't grow up around here. I grew up in Michigan, but my husband and I met in college, and I call Evergreen Park, the Chicago area, my home now for more than half my life. So I think I'm from here now. I think I get to say that. And in addition to all that I do professionally, I have my family and our community that I'm also very involved in. So.
Oh, beautiful. And how did you become a professional organizer?
Well, when I started my business, there wasn't a rubric. It was not something that you could just open a book and say, chapter 1, here's how you start an organizing business. So thankfully, owning an organizing business means I'm probably pretty organized, which certainly helped me to establish a business that could nurture my professional goals and also take care of my family at the same time. And as my kids have gotten older, and my business has grown and grown and grown,
Yes.
Busier than ever. And I love getting to help people be their best selves.
And you're taking care of all of us at the same time. Full disclosure, Colleen has organized my home. She's helped me organize my new office. And she's absolutely wonderful and the perfect person to tell us, what is all the fuss about with Marie Kondo? Why is everyone fascinated with this sparkle of joy? And not only is it here in the Chicagoland area, we're hearing about the thrift shops that are overflowing with the people's stuff. She has encouraged them to leave. And my family and friends around the world are telling me so cool. The craze is everywhere. So what do you think this fuss is all about?
I think it's great. Marie Kondo, actually, her book was published. She's had a bestseller in 2015. So it's not a new fuss. And actually, I was asked to create a presentation around it 2 or 3 summers ago now. So I got to learn about it very intimately at that point. And there's so much to learn from what she has to say. And I also think it's just a new way to think of things. I spoke with someone specifically, and they were so excited. Something that organizing had escaped their grown child for a very long time. And for whatever reason, this finally really connected with that child. Well, she was an adult. And it gave her a way to decide for herself what was going to bring her joy in her present life and what she could certainly let go of. It just made it very simple for her. And to have an additional tool to offer our clients and ourselves, if this resonates with you, wonderful. If it encourages us to part with things and to figure out what we really do love.
So tell us how clutter does negatively impact our lives and how clearing it can improve our lives and our health. Where do you start?
I obviously am a huge fan of decluttering. That's what I do, and it's what I help others. So I think it's always a great time to do that. But I can also objectively tell you that, clinically speaking, clutter can contribute to anxiety. It can contribute to depression. It can contribute to our feelings of isolation if we feel we can't have friends and loved ones in or helpers in to help us in our home. And also if we feel so consumed with worry about our items that we don't feel that we can leave our home. If we feel, well, I really should be taking care of things, but I don't know how, but I feel guilty then going out with friends and doing things. So clutter can really clog the gears of our minds and our lives. And that's just from our mental health. There's also the physical aspects of clutter. So imagine a pile of books taking a tumble to the floor as you sit next to them if they're on the table next to you. On the other hand, what if you take a tumble over the pile of books? So there are things that can negatively impact our spaces because sometimes clutter gets in our way, or we have to move it aside to get to the things that we do want. There's a research from Cornell that says a cluttered kitchen makes us make unhealthier choices. If we can't get to the kitchen counter to cut the vegetables for our salad, then we're going to resort to maybe unhealthier food choices too. And then the last part of clutter is if it's sat in our homes for a long time, it can really harbor dust or moisture and mold, occasionally bugs and things like that. So when we have the opportunity to clear our clutter, we're actually cleaning our air and cleaning our spaces, and it gives us a chance to live happily, but also actually healthier. It can help us to breathe easier and to feel better in lots of ways.
So what then is the first step to starting to organize ourselves in our homes?
I get that question a lot. So the quickest ways to derail our organizing process is to first of all go buy more things to help us get organized. We don't want to buy more containers just in the interest of getting organized. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing that we should not do is to start without a plan. So my encouragement to most of my clients is that we begin the process with a plan. Instead of going in and just opening doors and pulling things out, or starting 14 different projects all at once, and then of course we're going to feel overwhelmed. We're going to increase the clutter before we make it better, and we're going to lose our motivation then. So sitting down and actually crafting a plan and deciding where our first steps and second steps and third steps might be, it really is empowering, and it's a great first step.
And then what is the process? So if we resist the urge to go to Home Depot and come back with the storage bins, what is the process? Could you talk us through a little bit?
Of course.
Home. Let's talk about a home before we would talk about a business.
Okay. So I'm going to go one step even smaller and say a room, or a cabinet. Depending on how overwhelmed we feel, starting small sometimes can relieve some of that pressure and that anxiety. So let's say the kitchen. The kitchen is very common, and improving those areas that we spend so much time in, spending any time organizing in that space helps everyone right away. So in the kitchen, in any space really, we want to start by sorting what's there. We just need to have an opportunity to take an inventory, to pull things out, not everything, just parts of it out. Because once we know that we have an excess in one area or one category or another, then that leads us to the next step, which is potentially purging some of those items if there's too much of it. So if we're in a kitchen cabinet and we find out that we have 11 cookie sheets, no one needs 11 cookie sheets. So we might look at those now that we've sorted them and determined what we have. Now we can look at them a little more critically and say which ones are the ones that we would actually pull out and use today, tomorrow, the next day, and which ones maybe aren't looking so good anymore. Maybe they don't have the right surface anymore. And so once we've sorted, we can kind of start to determine what maybe can go. So what can get cleared out, what clutter could leave.
Right. And what I would imagine how we approach it, Colleen, depends on our stage in life. So young children, much more difficult to organize than teens, or maybe not, but young children, teens, empty nest, the seasons of the year, all of these things will influence how we process and how we organize, correct?
Absolutely. Different people are compelled to keep things for different reasons. So children are very much emotional and you know, they're very attached to their belongings. But if you wait not very long, their interests may change, and that's okay. And the same can be said for teens and adults. We all evolve, and so decluttering and taking a look at our organizing should happen on a regular basis because we evolve on a regular basis. So any opportunity to do that is going to help us to lead a better life.
And you talk about emotional attachment. I liked how Marie Kondo talked about the functional value of items as opposed to the informational value, and then the emotional value. And she says often we're either we keep in something because we're attached to the past or we're fearful of the future.
Certainly.
What are your thoughts on that, and how do you get past maybe an emotional attachment to things that are not serving you anymore and certainly not sparking joy?
Sparking joy, that is, it really is, that phrase really does help us to kind of put that into to terms that make sense. I usually tell my clients and people who come to my presentations that I am not there just to make them get rid of things. So clearing clutter is a step of organizing, but really the organizational process is more than just getting rid of things. It's really determining what that we have will nurture our lives today and in the future. And respecting, one thing that I do love about what Marie Kondo has to say is she starts from a place of gratitude. We can be grateful for everything that has come before this point. It doesn't necessarily mean we need to keep all of it, but we can be grateful for where we've come from and how those items have served us. But if we have a limited amount of space, perhaps we don't need to keep 20 boxes of those things from the past. Maybe we really can choose the things that we love the most, which still spark joy and which tell our story, and maybe we can start to let go of some of those other things that really don't anymore.
And appreciating the things we have. A quote that I loved from Marie Kondo was, just like the gentle shake we use to wake someone up, we can stimulate our belongings by physically moving amongst them, exposing them to the air, making them conscious, alive if you may. So we're taking those things that we do love, that we're going to keep, and giving them new energy and making them joyful to be around us. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think anybody, if they're open enough to it, can walk into a space and feel energy, good energy, not necessarily bad energy, but negative energy. That's why this time of year, everybody just wants to open up the windows and breathe that life and smell the fresh air. And so any opportunity to feel our things and to see our things, it gives us a good chance to kind of inventory what we have, but it does give us a chance to re-choose our items. So if you are going through a closet full of things and making conscious decisions on those things that really do spark joy, you're going to be that much more committed to actually using those items. One thing I mention often in my presentations is that if you do have treasure, and I think we all have treasure, if there's something that you truly treasure, then elevate it. By all means, do something with it. If it is a jersey from your basketball team that went to state when you were in high school, if it was a keepsake from a loved one. A woman at a class last week mentioned a quilt that her grandmother had made that was in a box in the attic, and she wanted to do something with it, so she had it framed, and now it's hanging on the wall in her dining room where everyone can see it. So just if we truly treasure those things and we want to have that shake and that awaken, choose to do something with it. Make it, give it that life again.
I like that. So even if we do want to keep it, it's not just stuffed at the back of the wardrobe. It's actually now a treasure and in a position to be admired and to be appreciated almost on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Tell me this, Colleen. What about the tough to tackle items? So I have organized my life and my office and my home and my basement much better with your help and guidance over the years. I still have an attic that's off a bedroom, which in there are some really treasured things that I chose to keep. One of being boxes and boxes of journals. I journaled my life from I was 12 years old, and that's the unfolding of me, and it's valuable to me. But I discovered my son, who moved into that bedroom, had started going in and reading them announced to me, and I saw them by his bed, and I felt uncomfortable, and I didn't know if I was ready for him to read about the me before he and his, me and his father got together. So should I have something if it's not something I want everyone to see? And this is not deep dark secrets. This is just the life, the person you were before the person you are now. What's your advice? Is this that box again? This is now the Swedish, Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, a book that was popular a couple of years ago. And she suggested that we have a box that's just for us. This will be destroyed upon my death. If you read it, I'm coming back to haunt you, kind of thing. So are there some things that we can keep that are really just for our own consumption?
Of course.
Yes.
Absolutely is the answer. And why shouldn't we? Just because it might not be something that we take out and use regularly, then it doesn't necessarily mean it has to go. Again, I'm not here to tell anybody that they have to get rid of things, especially things that are so personal and so important. Perhaps they are just for only your consumption, and that's certainly okay. So yes, you may keep those. If you needed permission, yes, you may keep those. I know that you don't have millions of things cluttering your space. That is one very specific area and very specific type of item. So by all means, if they are meaningful to you, keep them. And if they're them being reserved only for your consumption is also important to you, then I don't think that's a bad thing to either request that people leave it be or to put it somewhere that's only accessible to you. And I think that's understandable. The other part of that, though, is maybe there will be a time when you do want to share that. Or maybe there will be a time, maybe you'd like to write a note to your sons that when they do come upon these again, this is how you'd like them to consume them. The box being destroyed upon your passing. Maybe you would like them to read that, but not yet.
Oh, I love that. So my children are still relatively young, teens and under. So our children are similarly aged. So just because a teenager may not be able to see mom as anything other than mom, the grown man, maybe the grandchildren, there will be a time they'll want to know my stories the way we want to know our parents' stories. I certainly want to know who my mother was, that 90-year-old lady, before my father, and we've certainly asked her those questions. So thanks. It's good to be reminded that they'll not always be young and confused. There may be a time when they'll realize that you're a fully realized person and didn't just, appear the day that you became their mother. Lovely. What about photographs? All those years of physical photographs, now all those years of digital photographs, that seems to me an area that we could probably all use some help with.
Certainly. So there are specialists, professional organizers like me that deal just specifically in photo organizing. So the questions that we ask when it comes to photo organizing are the same questions that we ask when we're organizing anything else. So we sort what's there. Okay, we purge what can go. You had asked about the process a little earlier. The third and fourth steps of the organizational process are assigning a home and figuring out how to store it. And all of this comes from Julie Morgenstern. I think we had mentioned her and her books in my previous interview,
show,
right?
Yes.
So it's her process. But the third and fourth steps are assigning a home and then figuring out how to store what we have left. And I think with photos, that part is very important. So asking ourselves what exactly we want to do with these photos. If we want to tell our story with these photos, if some of them are very far back, perhaps they're historical photos from a genealogy, and those people aren't here with us anymore and don't have, that's what's left to tell their stories. So taking the opportunity now to determining how exactly you'd like to use them. Is it just for your enjoyment? I am not a creative, I'm not a scrapbook person or something like that, but I know people who are, and if I had something that I wanted to tell, I would find out how to do that for that category. We usually make photo books after major trips. So maybe not the day-to-day, but that's something that my kids and I do together after the trips to help us kind of relive and remember what was most important about that trip. Yeah. So I don't have them about everything, I certainly don't. But we have picked and chosen things that really speak to us. So the question that I would ask is what exactly you want to do with them. Do we want to turn them into photo albums? Do we want to scan them and keep them digitally and protect them? And so once we know what it is that we want to do with them, that helps us to decide what the next steps are.
Right. And that would take us on to digital organization. And I know you could probably present an entire hour and more on that alone, but it really has become an area where so much of our lives, our finances, our documents are stored.
Absolutely.
Do you have some general advice for our digital organization?
Certainly. So next week is National Organize Your Files Week.
Oh.
In keeping with Tax Day. So I don't have to make these things up. That really is the thing. That will probably be my topic for my article next week. So there are absolutely ways that we can do that from a digital standpoint. But again, it comes back to the very simple questions of what do we want to do with those things? How do we plan to retrieve that information in the future? And just because we have unlimited digital space doesn't necessarily mean we need to keep everything, just like we would with our belongings around us. So determining how exactly you plan to retrieve the information. For example, you mentioned finances. So something that we could do, and that my husband and I do, is for our household finances, we keep them by month. Well, first by year and then by month. It's very simple. We don't need to categorize by utility bills or credit card bills or bank statements. It's just that month at a glance. And we do our paper organizing the same way. So we find one system that has worked for both paper and for digital. It's very simple. And then retrieval is just that much easier. So we can go, we can ask the question and go into wherever the information is stored and know that we can just retrieve information for 2019, April, and just have that all together.
So what I'm hearing is that the digital storage and organizing, it's the same basic principles as with our physical.
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
get the process down cold.
Certainly.
And then just keep it going forward. Colleen, many of our viewers are seniors and caregivers of seniors. So this is a stage in life that people are maybe downsizing, they're not as capable of their arms around a lot of materials as they once would have been, and maybe even preparing to move to a facility. So what would your advice be to our families who are dealing with a senior and downsizing and maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by their stuff?
Take a breath. That's always my first step with my clients is to take a breath. Of course we feel overwhelmed. Very often organization comes to us during life's transitions. So we have new babies, we have children going off to college, we have children coming home from college, we have a new move, we move to a new home, we downsize. So those transition times are already fraught with some uncertainty and some indecision. So when we've got these organizational projects to accomplish too, it feels very overwhelming sometimes. So take a breath. Start with our plan, right? Start room by room, right? So little steps are going to get you there just as much as big steps. It's just going to be in a much more manageable path. So The answers are still the same, whether we can tackle big projects all at once. And most people, as we age, either our energy level isn't as high anymore, or our desire, not even ability necessarily to focus on tasks, but perhaps we just don't want to dedicate hours on end to these. So having a plan for each room that we can go in and take care of a couple of tasks for a certain amount of time and then move on and go on to something else that we'd like to do is the answer for whatever stage of life we're in. Yeah. Whether we have small children at home, whether we have our first home, whether it's our final home and we are downsizing into a condo or something like that. Getting organized and clearing clutter is always, of course, always the right answer. Yeah. But it gives us a chance to have a hand in those transitional times too, to make decisions for ourselves.
And one of the things I'll often say to my estate planning clients is lifetime giving. Everything doesn't have to go through the will or through the trust or after death. You can now give in life, have your family appreciate the item, as well as you're now decluttering and not having to be surrounded by those things yourself. And as you mentioned earlier, we can tell our stories through our items and through our gifts and through what we have.
Absolutely. So many times we keep the good china tucked away, or we tell your organizer or your caregiver, I really want my so-and-so to have such and such. Wouldn't it be more meaningful to have the opportunity to give that item to that person yourself? So you could sit next to them on the couch and tell them why it was important, or who those people in the photo were. I have a client who was able to pass on some personal items from a loved one who had passed to grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and to be able to tell them why it was important to their grandfather and great-grandfather, why those items were so important. And it was so much more meaningful then to the recipient. So it gives us a chance to tell the story, to have that connection, and to say why these items, and why you want that person to have it specifically. That's a gift to that person, to know that it was important to give that on to them too. So.
And from the estate planning perspective, you make sure it goes to the right person.
Yes.
Because you're right there to give it to them. And speaking again of estate planning, I would be remiss if I didn't advocate for the prominent and accessible display of estate planning, documents, wills, trusts, important powers of attorney. In all of our organizing, we do want to make sure that they are, front and center, correct? Especially with our seniors.
And may I be honest? Didn't you just help me with this?
Yes.
Just this time last year. So we had decided, now that my children were older and our focus had changed from their care more to their education, that it was certainly time for us to get our affairs in order. So because, again, we evolve and our focus changes. So at least one person, probably more than that, needs to know where all of those items are. And as the description and the instructions are in your I don't want to say final papers, but those are the decisions that you make for yourself. So your executor needs to know, the family members need to know. They might not need to know the content, but they certainly need to know broad strokes, and also where all of that information is located, and who their attorney is that knows everything as well. So you helped us through this process just a year ago, and my boys are now older. They're, two of them are legally adults, and so they know exactly where all that information is, and our executor knows, and we have all of that, and we update it. When I asked you a question and we changed the language in some things, we made sure to take all of the old information out and purge that and replace it with just the new information. We never want to have multiple copies floating around the house.
An important part of organization.
Absolutely.
And another element that I wouldn't have naturally thought was part of organization that you focus on, I heard you speak on time management years ago, and it always stayed with me about work-life balance. So why do you teach time management side by side with life and professional organization?
Certainly. So clutter shows up in lots of ways. clutter is our physical clutter, but it can also certainly be our time clutter and how we choose to focus on things, what we choose to focus on, our priorities. And so in my classes, I always start out talking about 20 minutes about time management, because if organizing and time management were easy, I wouldn't have a class and I wouldn't have a job. However, we know that that's not the case. So we need to clear time clutter and things that aren't serving us so we can focus on the things that are, just like focusing on the things in our home that serve us and that don't. So I do talk about that. Time, work-life balance is not always an even hour-for-hour exchange for certain, but it's the quality of time that we spend, and also knowing what we absolutely don't need to spend time on today. That's actually very freeing for me, is knowing these things are taken care of. I don't have to do those today. I need to focus on being with Eileen today and taking care of some things this afternoon, versus I don't have to do everything all the time. So that's clutter clearing too.
Yeah, this is wonderful information, Colleen. And I also want to ask about you being a professional singer. You're a vocalist, you're a church cantor, you're an instrumentalist. How has your 30 plus years in that field informed your presentations and your organization and your teaching about it?
I am so blessed to have been doing the public speaking and singing since I was in 8th grade, 13. I just addressed a group of 7th graders at a middle school career day. I get to speak to the most wonderful people just last week. And I mentioned to one of the groups that I was so pleased that I had gotten over my fear of public speaking very early. That has served me well.
Over and over.
Forever. And I'm so grateful for that. And I think that having those skills to be able to present to 2 or 20 or 200, we all have something to say. We all have a story. And so being able, knowing that I can stand up and just offer that is very energizing and very empowering. And so I'm very pleased that I'm able to do that, but it also means that I come at organizing and everything else from a very spiritual perspective as well. So I'm just pleased that I can take my organizing and take the skills and merge them so well with the professional speaking, because then I get to speak to more people and help more people out.
And it is our game.
So thank you.
If our viewers want an in-home, an in-office, a consultation about their own organization, if they want to know about your coaching presentations, I know you speak at libraries, park districts, schools. If they would like to get a hold of your blog, this wonderful blog that you've been doing weekly for years and years and years to bolster their skills and their motivation, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I do have a website. It's peaceofmindpo.com. So the PO is important. That's for professional organizing. And I do have a newsletter that I send out every week. You can subscribe right there on my website. And my article that I publish once a week also on an organizational topic. There's over 400 articles out there on a range of organizational topics. So if there's something that you're interested in, I have probably written about it somewhere along the way. And you can reach out to me there also via email for scheduling a presentation or talking to me more about having an in-home or in-office organizing.
Beautiful. And are you going to put all that information together in a book one of these fine days?
My friend Eileen Curlin-Walsh told me that years ago that I needed to do that. I have not done that yet, but it's always there. Yeah, so hopefully,
a future project. And any final thoughts for our viewers? What would you want them to take away, if nothing else, from today's presentation?
I would say, if you are feeling the urge to get organized or just feeling inspired, there's never a wrong time, whether it's a small project or a large project. Getting organized is the way to help you with your life today and every day forward. So any time invested in this project or process is going to reap rewards for a long time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Colleen. And thank you, viewers. There is no excuse now. We can just get rid of the clutter, get ready for spring, summer, and all that sparkling joy in our future. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time on Where the Road Rises.